Okay, I am back. I don't know if you are, so maybe you'll be able to join back in. Some folks have gone over to YouTube and are going to be there, and that's fine too. Either one works. But y'all just let me know if this stream is actually working now. Okay, I think we're on. Okay. Oh, we are trying to finish up Brene Brown's book, Braving the Wilderness, and that's our intention this evening. There are some storms in the area, but this week has been an interesting week with our provider again, called Windstream. God bless them. All right. I think we're on now. I think we are. Hey. Mike says it's better. Okay. Good. Let's see if we can continue with this evening's session. All right. Make a little adjustment there in real time while everybody is here. Okay. All right. Life is good. I have had many opportunities, as I mentioned a moment ago, many opportunities to challenge everything surrounding meditation for me. I've had wonderful opportunities to do that as of late. So, all right, let's see. Okay. Is that better? Hey, how y'all doing? Okay, we're going to attempt this again. Now I'm having to make some adjustments that I was not able to make just a second ago. Let's see here. Well, how many are thankful this evening? Can I get an amen from the amen corner? People who are thankful, grateful. Any grateful folks? I sure am grateful. All right. Thank you all for being here and for being patient. Technology, again, is a wonderful, wonderful thing until it's not. Until it doesn't work. Hey! All right. Now, I think we are just about ready. I needed to make one final adjustment. Yeah. Okay. Now, I'm going to connect to our comments again to make sure. Are we still coming through clear? Everybody good? Are we coming through clear now? All right. So glad to be with you. In fact, why don't we do this? Since we're restarting, let's come into a space of centering prayer for just a moment. I'm so grateful. So grateful that things are as good as they are. So I say thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I offer up gratitude. I just say thank you. Thank you. I've mentioned to you before that Meister Eckhart said if the only prayer I ever prayed was thank you, that would suffice. And I'll have to say that I agree. All right. I'm actually really glad that I get to do this evening because this chapter spoke to me very deeply. Because if there's anything I have wanted One Love Spirit Center to represent, it's belonging, true belonging. And the title of this chapter is Strongback, Soft Front, Wild Heart. And I love all of that. I love the aspects of all of that. But I have to be honest with you, the closing statement of this chapter is where my heart goes to the most this evening. The closing few statements. I'll leave you with this, she says. There will be times when standing alone feels so hard, or too scary, and we'll doubt our ability to make our way through the uncertainty. Someone, somewhere will say, don't do it. You don't have what it takes to survive the wilderness. This is when you will reach deep into your wild heart and remind yourself, I am the wilderness. Not tough enough to handle it. I am the wilderness. Let's talk about strongback, soft front, and wild heart. Every one of us at some point in our life has struggled with feeling like we don't belong. And I know for me, it's interesting that gets covered so much in this book, because tomorrow evening I'm sharing a conversation with a dear friend of mine, and I know that part of our conversation will be around that, because he and I met during a time when we were both going through a tremendous amount of deconstruction and a whole lot of dejection and rejection. And we know what it's like to not feel like you belong and to do what you can to fit in. But fitting in, as we'll talk in a few minutes, fitting in is not a place where people really want you. It's a place where you really want to be. And so you do what it takes to fit their mold so that you can feel comfortable and they don't have to feel uncomfortable. Or so that they can feel comfortable even at the expense of your discomfort. This is a place, though, One Love Spirit Center, where we expect for you to show up and be you. In fact, I don't want to say we require anything, but if we require anything, it's that. It's that you show up and you be your authentic, essential, genuine, true self. This is a place where you belong. And where you're celebrated. You're not just tolerated. So let's look at this concept of strong back, soft front, wild heart. But somebody real quick let me know, is everything running okay? Are we still running along well? I'm looking now before we get into this. I want to make sure we're good. Those of you who are watching by YouTube, those of you that are watching by Facebook later, we had some technical difficulties, so we're trying to make sure we are flowing along okay here. Somebody let me know. I hope we're good. Okay, we're good. Rachel, is that saying yes? Dr. Banks, we're good? A-okay. Thank you. All right. I'm going to read the opening few lines here from Strongback, Soft Front, Wild Heart. Okay. All too often, our so-called strength comes from fear, not love. Instead of having a strong back, many of us have a defended front, shielding a weak spine. In other words, we walk around brittle and defensive, trying to conceal our lack of confidence. If we strengthen our backs, metaphorically speaking, and develop a spine that's flexible but sturdy, then we can risk having a front that's soft and open. How can we give and accept care with strong back, soft front compassion, moving past fear into a place of genuine tenderness? I believe it comes about when we can be truly transparent, seeing the world clearly, and letting the world see into us. Now that is Joanne Halifax. And Joanne Halifax is an author and a teacher. She's also a Buddhist priest. She's a Zen priest, actually. And she's written several books. She's an anthropologist and an activist. And Brene was talking about meeting her for the very first time and how she did an event with her, and she was pretty intimidated in that moment. And she said that after the event, they were getting ready to leave, and I'll read this here. I'm going to read several lines because this chapter was really chock full of some great stuff, and I just underlined a few things, and I'm going to give a little commentary, but I really want to give room to Brene because the way she wrote this, if you've read it already, like I say, I'll expound a little, but the way she read it and the way it comes out, the way she wrote it and the way it comes out when you read it is powerful. She says, as we were leaving from the event, I said, I'm whipped, but I guess it's off to the meet and greet. She said Joan looked at me and said, I'm going to my room to rest before tonight. Why don't you do the same? I told her, yeah, that sounded great, but I felt bad saying no. I'll never forget what she said back to me. And here's what she said. Let this minister to you, really. Tonight, we will exhale and teach. Now it's time to inhale. There is the in-breath and there is the out-breath. And it's easy to believe that we must exhale all the time without ever inhaling. But the inhale is absolutely essential if you want to continue to exhale. Brene's response, dang. That's a good Texas response. Dang. Take a moment and think on that. I did. When I was rereading this again today, it dawned on me that I spend a lot of time exhaling. Mike will know what I'm talking about. I spend a lot of time exhaling because I'm in, for all intents and purposes, paid to talk, paid to give sermons, inspirational speeches, personal coaching, leading meditations every day now. I'm essentially expected to constantly exhale. And there have been times when I've had nothing on my plate to do, and I have fought with the feeling that I should be doing something. I know that comes from conditioning. I know it comes from me being conditioned that you're not supposed to be lazy. You're supposed to be working. And if you don't work, you don't eat. And boy, you better get up and do something. Don't waste your time. Now, this is where I need somebody maybe needs to hear this. It is not a waste of your time to just sit and be. It is not a waste of your time to meditate. Some people think because you're not doing anything and because you're studying essentially the art of nothingness, that you're not doing anything and so therefore it's not important. Honestly, I think it is more important to receive the breath. Or not more important, but it's just as important. That's the difference. I agree, Mike. Being versus doing. That's the difference in being and doing. You're not a human doing, you're a human being. So just inhale for a moment. Just inhale. And let go. As parents, we're constantly exhaling. Washing clothes, cooking food, cleaning the house, making sure the kids are ready for school. If you have a partner in the house, making sure they're okay and they have what they need. Go, go, go. Do, do, do. And if you're not careful, you become defined by that. And if you become defined by doing, you will be confined to doing. And so the first part of this just really ministered to me today. That when I find myself in those moments, when I'm doing nothing, that's quite okay. Just do nothing. Just be present. Just be. Inhale. Inhale. Just went on further to say strong back. All of us will spend our life constantly strengthening our back, softening our front, and trying to listen to the whispers of our wild heart. For some of us, however, the focus of our work will be on developing that strong back. When strengthening our back is our particular challenge, we are often driven by what people think. Perfecting, pleasing, proving, and pretending get in the way of the strong back. One way to strengthen our courage muscle is learning how to put braving into practice. That work looks like this. And Mike, I promise you I will read that back a little later. That's just a lot to read at the moment, but I promise you I will read it back. Here we go back to braving. This was split up into an acrostic, and we have been through this already in the earlier sessions, but I love this again today. It's necessary. I think it's necessary this evening to follow what we just talked about with this. It's okay for you to practice braving, and here's the B. Boundaries. So many of us think that if we put boundaries in place, all of a sudden we're not being inclusive. All of a sudden we're not being loving. If we don't say yes to everything we're asked to do, especially as ministers, I'm telling you, this puts me in a place of vulnerability this evening, which is a wonderful thing, by the way. We may talk about that a little more in a few minutes. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's strength, it's power, it's being able to be transparent. But sometimes we put ourselves in a position where we think we've got to constantly be doing, and if we say no, now all of a sudden that people start asking questions about how powerful are you, or how loving are you, how accepting are you? What do you mean you need time to exhale? I thought you were spiritual. I thought you had a direct line to God. I can't believe you told me no. Pastor Jay, or preacher, or reverend, or guru, or whatever. Boundaries. Learning to set, hold, and respect boundaries. The challenge is letting go of being liked and the fear of disappointing people. I'm telling you, no sometimes will save your life. And if it disappoints people, you can't help that. I mean, I hate to say it that way. Maybe that sounds mean or whatever, but if you disappoint some people, you can't help that. You must set boundaries for your own good and for the good of your calling. Otherwise, you won't be good for anyone. R, reliability. Learning how to say what we mean and mean what we say. The challenge is not over-committing and over-promising to please others or prove ourselves. The challenge is not over-committing and over-promising to please others or to try to prove ourselves. This is speaking straight to me, whether it's speaking straight to you or not. I have had the tendency in my entire life of ministry, spiritual leadership, whatever you want to call it, to overcommit and to overpromise and to try to prove myself to others. There's words that ring out in my ears from when I was a kid, when I heard someone very influential in my life say to me, "You will never amount to anything." I spent the rest of the majority of my adult life trying to prove that I could amount to something and kept having failures, kept falling. I believe it was because the unconscious mind was trained to believe that I wouldn't amount to anything, while the conscious mind knew that I already was connected to consciousness. I didn't have anything to prove. I already was. I put up a post about that a couple of days ago. Essentially, you don't have anything to prove because you already are worthy. You already are valuable. You already are powerful. So therefore, you have nothing to prove. But reliability is important because it is important to say what we mean and mean what we say. It's going to be harder to do that, though, if you're overcommitting and you're challenging yourself and you're comparing and you're in a state of competition with others. It'd be mighty hard to do that. Accountability. Learning how to step up, be accountable, take responsibility, and issue meaningful apologies when we're wrong. The challenge is letting go of blame and staying out of shame. I used to think that an apology meant that I was shameful. I used to think that screwing up meant that I was shameful. Now I know we all step in shit sometimes. And we need to admit it. We need to say, I did, and be able to apologize. And stay out of blame and stay out of shame. Accountability. Man, our world leaders could use that, couldn't they? Our world leaders could use this teaching. All right, in the word braving, we come to the V, vault. Vault. Learning how to keep confidences, to recognize what's ours to share and what's not. The challenge is to stop using gossip, common enemy intimacy, and oversharing as a way to hotwire connection. One of the quickest ways you can connect with somebody is to have a common enemy. It is unfortunate that we can get collected quickly, a crowd around a common enemy. But it's almost like pulling teeth sometimes to get people to gather around a common love. One Love Spirit Center. We're growing, but I find it interesting. If we preached hell and we preached condemnation and we had a particular political party that we preached against and we constantly were downgrading, you'd be surprised how many people would show up. It is interesting how gossip and common enemy intimacy and oversharing can quickly hotwire a connection. I like how she used the term hotwire. It's the difference between using a key to crank a car. It's the shortcut, and you only do it because you didn't have the key to it. And we've been hotwiring connections. We've been creating connections for a long time around a common enemy. And that needs to end. We need to get rid of that. I'm just saying. Here we are, One Love Spirit Center, radically inclusive. Radically inclusive. Everyone is welcome. And it's hard to get people to believe that you belong and that you are welcome anywhere. All right, moving on. Okay, I was chasing that rabbit and ran up under a bush there. I'm going to keep going. Integrity. Learning how to practice our values even when it's uncomfortable and hard. The challenge is choosing courage over comfort in those moments. Practice your own values even when it's uncomfortable. I don't believe in a God that created humankind to fail. I don't believe in a God who's angry and ogre up in the sky looking over to make sure you do all the right stuff, and if you don't, he's going to smack you and put you into hell for eternity. I don't believe in a God who had to kill someone, a human, made in his likeness and image, so that he could stand to look at you. I don't believe in a God who is condemning, a God who creates people to have desires and impulses only to tell them, but you better not do it or I'll fry you for eternity. That's not popular, and a lot of people they'll break relationship with you over that. We are absolutely affirming of all people, LGBTQ and whatever letters you want to put in it. Transgender, cisgender, the list goes on and on and on. If you want a scripture for it, my Christian friends, scripture I'll give to you is that we don't see anyone after the flesh anymore, but after the spirit. So whatever the label is, labels don't stick to water. They only stick to the containers you put the water in. That's why you can't label me, and you can't label One Love Spirit Center. All right, I didn't went to preaching. Learning how to practice your values even when it's uncomfortable. And I said all that to say, I find it sometimes there are people who seek to make me, push me out to the outer, push me outside of the circle because I'm a heretic in their eyes. I'm going to hold to my values even when it's uncomfortable. And it cost me my career, almost cost me my ordination. It did cost me my ordination in one place. But I believe integrity is being able to stand up for what your values call you to, even when it's uncomfortable and hard. The challenge is choosing courage over comfort in those moments. And if we're going to do what we say we are as a community, One Love Spirit Center, we're going to have that kind of integrity. All right. I like this next one. And in fact, I love this word, non-judgment. Learning how to give and receive help. The challenge of letting go of helper and fixer as our identity and the source of our self-worth. Non-judgment starts here first. It's an inside job. Don't judge yourself. If you need help, ask. It's funny because I know people who spend their whole life, in fact, their career is helping other people, but they will not ask anyone to help them. Am I speaking to somebody right now? That you're a healer, but you won't ask for help with your own healing? That you're a caretaker, but you won't ask for someone to help you with taking care of you sometimes? Is there anybody out there? All right. Did we start stuttering again on our connection? Is there anyone who this hits you at home? That you find it hard to be vulnerable and say, I need help? Well, that's a part of non-judgment. You can't be fully radically inclusive of others until you're radically inclusive of your own self, even at your worst moments. That's radical inclusion. All right, here we go. Generosity. Learning how to set boundaries that allow us to be generous in our assumptions about others. The challenge is being honest and clear with others about what's okay and not okay. So, being non-judgmental is taking care of yourself. Being generous is learning how to set boundaries that allow us to be generous in our assumptions about others. Be generous to other people when you come in contact with them. Instead of automatically casting a judgment on them, be generous. But also know when enough is enough and know when it's not okay. When what they're doing, saying, the boundaries they're crossing is not okay. That's all a part of generosity. You can't fully be honest in your generosity until you are able to set some of those boundaries and say, hey, listen, what you just did is not okay, and I'm not going to let you do it again. And you can say it with love and with kindness. I mean, I'm telling you, I am learning now how to say to people who are in complete disagreement with me or who don't believe or see the world the way I do, that's fine. I personally think, and I said this to someone the other day, I think you are absolutely asleep consciously. But I'm not going to try to rouse you from your sleep. All it would do is piss you off. Sleep while you need to sleep. And they just looked at me like a calf looking at a new gate. It was, and I've said even to my own father, I completely disagree with what you just said, but you're my father and I love you. Being able to do that, that's generosity right there at work. All right. Okay. You know, she went on to talk about how Maya Angelou was on Bill Moyer's show, and she said, I belong to myself only, and I'm very proud of that. She said, I am very concerned about how I look at Maya. She said, and I like Maya very much. A lot of people would take that as arrogance or conceit. I say it's confidence. I say it's power. I say it's complete awareness of who you are. She goes on to say that there's a certain level of self-love and self-awareness and self-respect that must be in your life in order to make it through the wilderness. And she said a powerful example of a strong back comes from her friend Jen Hatmaker. I loved seeing this because when Jen Hatmaker, who was a popular Christian minister in the conservative, sort of moderate Christian community, evangelical Christians, I remember when this happened too, because my friend and I had a podcast called The Holy Heretics, and we watched Twitter a lot with different people. Jen had a tremendous following on Twitter, still does, but she had a tremendous following on Twitter, and when she came out and openly supported her LGBTQ friends and family, and she was inclusive toward them, a barrage of attacks came through Twitter. And we watched it. Scott and I watched that transpire. And we reached out to her and we said, hey, we'd like to have you on our podcast. Jen Hackmaker became a friend of ours after that. And we had her on the podcast. And she essentially told us the same thing that she wrote in the book. And I won't read it all. It's a long section, but I will say this. She said, speaking against power structures that keep some inside and others outside has cost. And the currency most often drafted from my account is belonging. The currency most drafted from my account is belonging. But you're going to have to build. You have to build up, and you have to be able to belong to you. If you belong to you, Dr. Dyer used to tell us all the time, he would say, if you love the one you're with, you'll never be lonely. And the one you're with the most is you, is your own self. Build that up. Okay, all right, let's move along. Now, I don't want us to run too late here. I went on further, ending up that section on soft front, the soft front. She said, we have to maintain our strong back. It's not a one-time effort. And, man, is it hard to keep the front soft when there's so much hurt. But I'm encouraging you to push through. She goes on to say, and I underlined this, most of the time we approach life with an armored front for two reasons. One, we're not comfortable with emotions, and we equate vulnerability with weakness. How many of you ever had somebody tell you that vulnerability was weakness? They may not have said it in those words, but they essentially said it. Big boys and big girls don't cry. Be strong. You're told repeatedly, especially if you're someone who was a gay or lesbian growing up, somewhat of a minority growing up, women growing up. You were told, be tough, be strong, hold your ground. Sometimes women were told, submit. If it's a man, submit. And so you find yourself submitting. Every time there's a man speaking, you sort of cower down, because of the way you were built, unconsciously. This is why we're rebooting. This is why we're doing the meditations we're doing right now. Most of the time we do it for two reasons. Number one, we're not comfortable with emotions, and we equate vulnerability with weakness. Number two, our experiences of trauma have taught us that vulnerability is actually dangerous. If you've ever been traumatized within your soul, your heart, you've ever been a victim of abuse of any sort, you've been traumatized in your life, it makes it harder for you to open that heart space. As Ram Dass used to talk to us all the time about, make sure you don't let that heart space close. Be open-hearted. Be open-hearted. If you can't ever reach the place where you're completely open-minded, at least be open-hearted. But that's easier said than done if you've experienced trauma. And this is why we need to heal trauma. That's why One Love Spirit Center is here, to help heal all of those kinds of things. Violence and oppression have made our soft front a liability, and we struggle to find a place emotionally and physically safe enough to be vulnerable. Then she says, the definition of vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. Somebody write that down right now. The definition of vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And this is one of the reasons often we don't choose vulnerability, because it is risky, it's uncertain, and it's emotional exposure. I even said this to a few of my friends who've challenged my theological beliefs. I've said to them, the walk of faith is never the rigidity of literal interpretation of Scripture. The walk of faith is not knowing and going into the unknown anyway. What need have the certain of faith? You don't have to trust if you're certain. You don't have to know where you're going if the GPS is constantly telling you where the next turn is. Our invitation is into the cloud of unknowing, risk, uncertainty, emotional exposure. But vulnerability is not weakness. It's our most accurate measure of courage. I love how she says that. Vulnerability is not weakness, it's the most accurate measurement of courage. Are we willing to show up and be seen when we can't control the outcome? Are you willing to show up and be seen when you can't control the outcome? When the barrier of vulnerability is about safety, the question becomes, are we willing to create courageous spaces so we can be fully seen? And this is when it started to really just get to me when I reread this earlier today. That's what One Love Spirit Center is about. This is what we're about. Creating courageous space so that people can be fully seen. Creating courageous space where you can be fully seen, where your friends can be fully seen, where your enemies can be fully seen. We are creating that space. Okay. Then she went into the Wild Heart section. She said, I wish there was a secret handshake for the Wild Heart Club. I love that kind of stuff. I want the payoff for braving the wilderness to be some kind of ritual or symbol that says, listen to this, I'm part of this Wild Heart Club. I know what it means to stand alone. I know what it means to stand alone and brave criticism, fear, and hurt. I know the freedom of belonging everywhere and nowhere at all. The reward is great. But believe me, when Maya Angelou said the price is high, she was not kidding. I have made this quest, and I have the scars to prove it. But scars mean, she didn't say this, I'm saying this, but scars mean the wound is healed. And it reminds you of the even more strength you have through wisdom because you've already experienced it. It reminds me of when Jesus said to doubting Thomas, we call him doubting Thomas, but he pressed in. Jesus said to Thomas, reach forth and touch the scars. If you need that, reach forth and touch the scars. Okay. The mark of a wild heart is living out of the paradox of love in our lives. It's the ability to be tough and tender, excited and scared, brave and afraid, all in the same moment. It's showing up in our vulnerability and our courage, being both fierce and kind. A wild heart can also straddle the tension of staying awake to the struggle in the world, fighting for justice and peace, while also cultivating its own moments of joy. All right, I'm going to read this, and then we're going to go ahead and move toward closing. Whew. Okay, man, this feels good this evening. Thank you all for just letting me be so informal. True belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness as well. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. Today I choose to acknowledge that there are times that I'm afraid of being vulnerable. Today, I choose to acknowledge that there are times that I am concerned when I say no to something. Today, I acknowledge that there are times that I find it hard to speak truth to bullshit, because I want to make sure that I'm coming across non-judgmental and that I'm not being exclusive. I want to be inclusive. I acknowledge that there are times that I struggle with how to respond to some things, and I'm learning more every day that not everything needs a response. Some things just need quiet. I'm reminded of a story, and I'll share this, and then I'm going to bring us to a conclusion for this evening. Matthew McConaughey wrote a book called Green Lights. It's essentially the memoirs of his life so far. It's really funny. I'm a Matthew McConaughey fan anyway, and I listened to the audiobook. I would have enjoyed, I like holding a book, like I have this book. I like to hold the books and read them at times, but I decided to get the audiobook because I love the way Matthew McConaughey, the way he tells a story. And he said, after his first couple of hit movies, he found himself at a loss of balance. He was losing the country boy from Texas and Louisiana. He was losing that guy. And it was affecting his acting because his raw acting skill came from that person and personality. So he called his manager and he said, I'm not accepting any work for the next few months. I'm just going to go try to find myself again wherever I've gotten lost. And so he went out to New Mexico and out into the wilderness to a monastery. And he went on a silent retreat. And he went a few days in silence. And at a certain time in the evening, you could go and talk to the priest. And so he went and talked to a priest, and he said, look, I really need to talk to somebody about what's going on in my life. I need to essentially confess, really, to a lot of things that have been going on. And so the head priest there said, I know just the guy for you. So he went and got, we'll just call him Father Jake for right now. He went and got Father Jake, and Father Jake said, how about we meet in the morning and we'll take a walk? And Matthew said, that's great. Next morning they got together and they took a walk. And as they were walking, Matthew started confessing all his lust and cussing desires of the world and all of the shameful things that he felt ashamed of, and how he was just not following the purpose as he should. And he said he talked and bared his soul to Father Jake for 3 hours. He said, I just whined and moaned and told him everything, and he said, I gave it all to him. And he said, and all Father Jake did was listen to me for 3 hours. He said, we got to the end of the walk and we were about to head off to lunch. He said, and we stopped under this tree. I looked at Father Jake and said, man, that's all I got to give you. And Father Jake just looked at him and smiled, and he looked at Father Jake and he said, well, what do you have to say? He said, Father Jake looked at him and he just simply said, Matthew, me too, and turned and walked away. Matthew, me too. And he said in that moment he received such healing because he was made aware by this holy man that he was not alone. Well, sometimes that's all people need to know, is that you're not alone. You belong here. You don't have to try to fit in. There's nothing for you to change. In fact, what we want you to do is to show up raw. You. Just you. This is a place where you can be safe to do that. And I got to tell you something. I'm thankful we created a place like that, where you're just, in fact, we encourage it and we'll almost just make you do it. Just be yourself. Just be you. Okay. Whew. I sure love all of y'all. Okay. That ends this book study. I'm working on a couple of other books, but next week I have a plan to have a friend on with me to talk, and I'll go ahead and let the Wednesday night, because the Wednesday Connection group I'm not saying I don't fully embrace everybody, but y'all are extra special is all I'm saying. We are going to be having a discussion next Wednesday titled Psychics and Psychos, Prophets and Profiteers. Psychics and Psychos, Prophets and Profiteers. And I'm going to be talking with one of at one time was one of the foremost prophets in the prophetic charismatic movement. Woo, we're going to get into some very interesting things. Okay, tomorrow evening, you do not need to miss this. My friend, Pastor D.E. Paulk, is going to be on with me for a coffee conversation. We're going to be talking about religion and spirituality in the new world. Pastor D.E. Paulk is someone that I have spent, the better part of 15 years we've been friends, and we have gone on trips together. We've hung out together. What I love about him is that we're just able to hang out. We don't have to talk about theology and high spiritual stuff. We could just be. But he and I did go through some major deconstruction together around the same time, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But not just that, we're going to talk about religion and spirituality and the way we think it might look in this new world. Because I believe we're living in a new world. All right. If this ministry is a blessing to you and you choose to give financially, we want to say thank you for that. Those who have continued to give, we want to say thank you. The giving opportunities are on the screen right now. And it gives you a chance to connect in that way. Tomorrow morning, we're going to have our meditation at 6:30 a.m. On the weekends at 8 a.m. Sunday morning connection. Please be a part of whatever you can. I love you so much. I hope you know that. I hope you know that you matter so much to me. And it's very meaningful to me that you are on this journey with me, especially with what I've experienced in the past. The fact that you are willing to go right on along with me on this journey means a lot to me. I love you very much. Thank you for being here. I will see you all first thing early in the morning. Go get some rest. I love you. Make it a great rest of the evening because you can. I love you.